All right, I think we can do this. We can do this, right? There are cupcakes, guys. We can do this, and then we can eat cupcakes, right? Yes. Oh, greetings, ModevUX. I'm so happy to be back in Virginia. Feels so good. So I'm Wren, and like most mobile designers, I started out as a web designer. And I'd been working on the web for almost 10 years before I started designing mobile apps. So I felt pretty confident about taking my skills to the small screen, right? Mobile all the things. But the more time I spent designing mobile apps, the more I realized that the way I'd always thought about the page wasn't working. Designing pages for mobile apps wasn't working. It was holding my mobile designs back, and it was making things kind of terrible and boring. Because loading a new page for every single view created these long, repetitive rabbit holes of navigation of like swipe to the right and swipe to the right, and nobody could remember or understand what was going on. It was like, where am I? How did I get here? Where is that thing I was just doing a minute ago? And I thought there had to be a better way to design for mobile, which is how I kind of got started designing on the z-axis. The z-axis, you might remember that from geometry. I know I slept through a lot of it, but bear with me. The z-axis is the way we measure space above and below the x and y axes, right? Basically, it's a way to talk about designing up and down with interfaces made of layers that move independently of one another. This is a critical component in every designer's toolbox, no matter what size screen you're designing for, but especially for mobile designers, because we're always dealing with space constraints, right? We're always running out of pixels, and we're searching for a clever solution. So when you're struggling with those problems, like where do I put these filters, or how do I add these options that people don't really use very much, remembering that you have 3 dimensions to design in can save the day. So there are 2 important features to designing on the z-axis: layers and transitions. Layers are the key. They're kind of the foundation of designing on the z-axis because they're the way we differentiate levels that are above and below one another, right? They mark the points on the up and down where the different UI elements live, and they keep everything organized. So we have to be thoughtful about how we use layers, right? We're not making Big Macs here. We shouldn't just be piling stuff up on top of one another, thinking that it's gonna squish down into a pile of deliciousness, because it's not, all right? It's just gonna be a hot mess. We have to place things on the z-axis with care, right? So that we're improving the experience for our users. Layers should always make your design easier to understand. They should simplify things. So the way your layers interact with each other should reflect the hierarchy relationships between information. So for example, navigation often sits on its own layer on the z-axis, kind of above everything else closest to the user. No surprise, there's a reason we usually call it primary navigation. And this is kind of an extreme example from Tihan and Lax. It's not so much a popover as it is like a page takeover, but it really gets the point across about how important their menu is to their site. Any layer that's going to completely cover the rest of your interface should be one of the most important parts of your experience. You don't just want to do that lightly. But sometimes the menu isn't the most important thing in an app. Sometimes the view deserves top priority, like your inbox, right? Your inbox is way more important than any navigation menu. So in Gmail, the menu lives on a layer underneath your inbox, so that when you slide it over, you can still see the edge of your messages. Inbox visibility takes priority, and the layers reflect that and reflect what's most important to your workflow. The great thing about the z-axis is that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Layers aren't pages. They don't have to cover the entire screen. You can use the z-axis to keep just one button visible at all times. It's kind of what Facebook does with the chat heads for messaging, right? And Foursquare has done this too with their check-in button, though now I'm all confused by all the new Foursquare apps, so I don't know what's going on. But you know, having that one button keeps that feature front and center without taking up a lot of space, right? The button stays fixed in one place while everything else moves underneath it. And I don't really like tapping on the disembodied faces of my friends and family, but Facebook has had a really positive response to this design. So kind of what I've learned from that is that when we have clients who want that one button to pop a little bit more, right? Using the z-axis to give it its own layer is one of the more elegant possibilities that we can offer as mobile designers. So layers are all well and good, but they're just the first step. You need to add transitions to connect your layers so that everything makes sense, right? Without good transitions, you've got nothing. Because transitions serve a couple of really important functions. They help soften that moment of change in between layers. They describe where you came from and where you've arrived. And they provide cues about how information on the new layer relates to everything else. Transitions are kind of your chance to DJ your app, right? Like overlapping beats, making one jam flow into the next. No disruptions. They just smooth everything out, right? Like Bob Ross, right? Bob Ross never had any harsh edges, right? No sharp edges, just happy little trees. So most of the transitions we use in mobile involve sliding. Sliding is a really common transition because it's easy to execute and it's simple to understand. On mobile apps, stuff slides around all the time, and we don't even notice, because when it's done right, sliding seems really natural and intuitive. I really like how 500 pixels slides transparent menus over top of the view here. It's light and it's super fast, but it's not overdone. They aren't sliding the thumbnails in or anything excessive. It's just a great combination of layers and subtle transitions. Zooming is another really common transition, especially because of iOS 7. It kind of has a little bit of that wow factor. The TV Guide app here zooms the camera out to reveal this liminal space where they've put the menu. It's pretty sweet. And it reinforces the idea that the menu is sitting above everything else in the app. But it's a totally different effect than what Tihan and Lax did with their site, right? Where they were layering it on top. So the animation is really critical to understanding what's happening here. And like leaving the previous screen there helps users, how about this? Man, we'll play it again. Helps users understand how all the pieces relate to one another. And it's really well done. Because it's easy for us to think about animations like as eye candy, right? It's just something to add a little pop and sizzle to your app. But they should never be used that way, like decoration. Just like layers, transitions should always add to the user's understanding of how your app works. So if you want to see more examples of using layers and transitions in mobile apps, you should totally check out captivate.co. This is not my site. It was created by a designer named Ali Dreyer, who's awesome, and she's got an amazing library of animation patterns here. 2 Ps, you should totally check it out. You will lose a lot of time on the site, and you will enjoy every minute of it. So why does all of this matter? It matters because the z-axis is the first step towards designing 3-dimensional interfaces that don't live on screens. And unless you are lucky enough to be planning to retire in the next 10 years, you will probably be designing experiences that don't live on a screen. And that is terrifying and exciting. I don't know what that looks like, if it's 3D holographic command centers, if it's gesture-based smart home connections for the Internet of Things, like whatever Minority Report Tony Stark awesomeness is just a few years away, we have to get ready to create those interactions, which means that we have to understand how to design information in a 3-dimensional space and not just play around with visual tricks to lay things out with boxes and color, right? Layers on a flat screen are a hack, I get that, but they're an important hack because they're how we begin to prepare users and prepare ourselves for where our industry is going next. I'm excited. Are you excited? I'm excited. Thank you.